Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your friend and your host on this amazing journey as we explore the backstories and the lessons of some of the world's most inspiring women. This week is no different, but before I launch into my introduction for this week's amazing episode and the incredible friend I got to talk to this week, I want to extend a very big, heartfelt thank you to everyone who reached out to me on Instagram, on Facebook, and through my website with well wishes and congratulations on our big announcement. For those of you who haven't heard, who don't follow me on social media, I finally got to welcome our new baby into the world this past Thursday. We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, so it was a really exciting day. So our second daughter was born that day. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. It was the type of day that I wish for every single new mom to have as she's going through that really big process of bringing a new baby into the world. So it was a wonderful day. We both had a really great experience. We got out a day early, which was great. We're settling in at home and just kind of getting to know what the life looks like as we're now parents of two. So thanks to everybody who's reached out. Thank you for all of the just wonderful things that you're saying. We really do appreciate it. And we're just really excited about this new announcement. All right. So this week's episode, it is not very often that I get to sit down with somebody who I know so incredibly well. And this week, I got to sit down with one of my incredible friends. This week, you're going to meet Gretchen Heinen. Gretchen is she is just my people. I just adore her, and I know you're going to love her too. She is an expert and is insanely passionate in two areas. She is passionate about improving people's health, and she's also passionate about improving people's wealth. And so she has a couple of communities where she does that. She has a podcast of her own called Net Worth It. I believe we release on the same day. So if you subscribe to us both, then you can just get our new episodes all downloaded on your phone on the same day. But during her episode, coming up in this interview, you're going to hear some amazing things. You're going to hear about how she walked away from a stable, successful career as a nurse. That's an incredible story. You're going to hear about how her take on the way that other people's judgments and opinions impact us. And you're also going to hear some really straightforward, useful advice in her two areas of expertise, both your financial well-being and your health well-being, both health and wealth. So I'm really thrilled for you to meet her. Immediately you're going to see why I absolutely adore this woman. She is a flash of lightning in the world, and I am so thrilled for you all to meet Gretchen Heinen. Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am super, super pumped this week. More pumped than I have been in such a long time, because I get to interview one of my amazing, incredibly inspiring friends who I met through this crazy entrepreneurial journey that I've been on. It's just crazy, these amazing people that you meet. And we have just grown really close and have supported each other's businesses. And it's just been phenomenal. And I'm thrilled to have her on the podcast today because she has some incredible knowledge and just an amazing journey of her own to share that I know you all will benefit so much from. So I'm so excited to welcome Gretchen Heinen to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, April, that was the nicest thing anyone's ever said. And I have such a girl crush on you that I'm like, oh my gosh, my dream has come true.
We're literally, it's going to be like a geek out podcast episode. So just be ready for it, people. It's just be ready for it.
No, it's so true. I know your husband. I knew your husband first, which we'll talk about with my career as a nurse since he's a physician. And when I first found you, I was like, whatever I have to do to become her friend, like I'm going to become that girl's friend. I don't know how, but I'm going to become her friend. So it's awesome.
I'm so glad it worked out. That's phenomenal. Well, let's just dive in then and help people get to know you. Tell us a little bit about this crazy background, the nurse stuff, the post-nurse stuff, like all the stuff. Help us get to know you.
Okay. So my first degree was in microbiology. So I'm kind of a nerd. I like science. That's one thing I love about our connection is we can geek out on science.
Yeah, girl.
And so my first degree was in microbiology. And quickly, the one thing that I wish college did a better job of, or just I didn't get the experience, is that I didn't have anybody really sit me down and be like, okay, so do you know what kind of jobs you're going to be getting with this particular degree? But I just thought like, oh, I'll figure it out, or maybe I'll go to med school or something like that. And ended up having this microbiology degree that transitioned into becoming a nurse because I loved science and at the time I was working with indoor air quality on buildings, but I really loved people. And so I thought a natural next step would be to become a nurse because I could use all that science knowledge and I could care for people. And then I became a nurse and it was not what I thought it was going to be. I worked as a nurse for 10 years and I gave it, the best go I could, but what I struggled with as a nurse was the ability to only impact a few people at a time. Like I love nurses. I will forever be a nurse. And, caring for people in the healthcare setting is such a noble profession. But I saw that I just really couldn't impact people that many at a time, maybe a couple at a time. And I even took on some care management roles where I had a bigger picture job of the hospital setting. But what I really found exciting is when I could really impact people's lives as an entrepreneur, like thousands at a time. That's when I was like, okay, now I'm in the spot where I can use my science, I can use my brains, and I can also impact people's lives to better their health and their life.
That is what I absolutely adore about you is you are one of those. There's so many things, like, let's just be real, but you just have such an intense focus on literally helping people improve their lives. And that's such a broad thing to say, but in such actionable ways. So I just adore that about you. You mentioned during your background that, you were only able to help people one at a time and you've just sort of branched out and been able to do that a little bit more. I want to move a little bit into sort of where you're at today, and then I'm going to start picking apart that journey a little bit because it's a bit of a left turn that you took. It's not a typical path to go from microbiology to nursing to entrepreneurship. That is not a common path. So I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about how you made that decision, I guess, to move out of nursing and into something that's much more independent.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is a really fun story. When I was a nurse, there was two things I struggled with the most. Number one was keeping myself healthy because the shifts are grueling. You work 12-hour shifts most of the time. There are some 8-hour shifts, but most of the time you're working a 12-hour shift. And that includes maybe an hour commute on either end, plus the half hour that they don't pay you for. So by the end of the day, you're really looking at like a 14-hour day. And this is pretty much anyone that works in healthcare. I know you can relate to this, April, so much with your husband's role, but it really does just affect your own personal health. So it was super ironic to me that here we are trying to help people be healthier or well, or at least in the hospital setting, you're really just trying to get them to a point where they can be well enough to go home. And I couldn't take care of myself. And the other thing that was the worst part about my life was we had no money. And I hated admitting this, right? Like here I was surrounded by people all day long who we were all working together, but we're all making different money. Like the aide is working just as hard as the physician, and the aide is making, $10 an hour, $15 an hour. Maybe the nurse is making a little bit more per hour. And the physician, like I mean, I don't want to get off too much on a tangent, but the amount of work that physicians do and the sacrifice that they have to do, I mean, honestly, like they are not paid enough. And that might sound crazy to some of the listeners who look at their lives and are like, oh, what do you mean they make these big salaries? It's like, no, you have no idea what they do. And that doesn't even include the lab technicians and all the other people who are part of the healthcare system. And I just saw this like situation where I'm like, okay, the only way for me to make more money is to work more hours. And something about the way my brain is wired, and, I've done Strengths Finders, and Maximizer is really high on my list. And I just have to maximize every single thing. So not being able to maximize my health and not being able to maximize the amount of money I was making, it just killed me. And my husband works in construction. And when the 2008 housing recession happened, it literally brought us to our knees. And it was the worst that we've had ever in our marriage as far as how we were getting along and our money and all of it. And I had a baby around the same time. And it was really like, that was when I was like, something has to change.
There's so much there. God, your story is just incredible. And I'm really hoping I can do a good job in this episode of unpacking it so that people get the nuance and get the value out of it that I know is in the experience that you've had. So I just want to like frame up and ground us in this situation where, for everybody listening, Gretchen's in this position where she's gone down the path, right? Like went to school, did the, in the job that you're supposed to get, helping people, doing the right thing, right? Like all of these things are the things that a lot of people aspire to. I want to help people and I want to be in this profession, and that profession is not easy to get into, right? So there's a lot of work that goes into that. Then all of these other factors hit with the recession and your husband and your financial situation. You're having to sacrifice time in your commute and time with your family and also your own health and well-being. And all of those pieces sort of collide into one. And like a lot of people have been in that situation, or dare I say, people listening to this, a lot of people are in that situation, but you were like, no, there's a better way. Like there's a better way to do this. How did you start to think through what your options might be? Because again, tons of people are in that situation. Tons of people have been in that situation. Lots of them, if not most of them, stay. How did you get to the point where you were like, no, this isn't good enough. I can do more. I can do better. I can have more. I can be more. I can make more, which is where we're going to go with this episode. But how did you know that you could move out of that, and how'd you do it? Okay. So this is like a good turning point in the story. So the first thing that I had to do is really get real with myself, because I was surrounded by my peers who were coming into their jobs and making more money. So they were upgrading their houses and, they were upgrading their cars and upgrading their lives. And I just knew, like, if I don't get real with myself about where we are at right now, like I'm just going to end up in more debt than I am. And I can't stay on this train with these people because it's like causing me to feel panic. And I was crying at night and like laying in bed. And I was laying in bed one night and I told myself, if I ever get out of this situation, like I'm going to do something to help change the world, to help other people who are in this situation. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And so it's crazy. It gives me like goosebumps to talk about it right now, because I'm literally living that vision that I envisioned 10 years ago, that I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen to the callings that come my way. And I'm going to say yes to the things that come my way that I think are going to help me get there. So getting real was the first thing. And that meant getting real with my money, right? Like getting real with where we were with figuring out our net worth, what our monthly expenses were, what we needed to do to get ourselves out of this horrible financial situation. And that really started there. And at the same time, I knew that I had to change my health. So I knew that those two things, that the health changing, I had watched patients over and over and over for years change their health, and then they can do the things they never could do before. So why didn't that apply to me, right? So it did.
So I had to change my own health and change my wealth. So like the two I knew were combined, and I knew I needed to figure out a way to interrelate them, health and wealth. And the wellness industry is booming, right? Like it's a billion dollar industry. I don't even know how many billions of dollars. It's a huge industry. So I knew I'm going to find a way to interject myself into this industry so that I can use my talents and my experience and my passions, and I'm going to get myself into a situation that's better, and then I'm going to help other people do it.
I love it. Oh my God. And it's that, age old point that people bring up about when the why and when the motives behind the move you're going to make are big enough and strong enough and just authentic enough, it just makes some of those steps a little bit easier to take. I mean, you just know that the reason why you're doing it is such a big, important piece. One thing I want to ask though, you seem extremely confident right now. You seem like all of this was like not a big deal for you, but it had to have been. Was there part of you that was feeling any self-doubt? Was there part of you that was feeling like, because nursing was your comfort zone. This is a space that you had been in for a while, and that can be hard to break out of. Was there part of you that was ever like, I'm not sure?
So yes, that definitely, the short answer is yes. There are days, and I still have those days where I wake up and I'm like, is this really me? Or am I just pretending this is me? I don't know. Like, I think every single bigger step we take in life, we're going to have that feeling. And that's you are an expert in this. And I've actually learned a lot about this from you, is just how our brains try to keep us safe. And, our brain's job is to protect us and keep us alive. And yes. So, you talk about this all the time, and I love it. I soak in everything. I swear, as soon as you write a book, girl, I'm going to be the first one with 200 copies ordered. And
I'm so holding you to that.
Yes, I am, girl. I'm going to hand them out to everyone in my neighborhood. So I think that's normal to feel that. So I don't know if it was just the one thing that has benefited me from being a nurse is that I had to learn about how the brain worked to work with patients, right? So I learned a lot about how people best learn and how to best put yourself in a situation where you're teachable. When you have a patient who's coming in with chest pain and they're worried they're having a heart attack, now is not the time to educate them on their medication, right? Their brain is in this fight or flight state. So you can't do that. So what I did in this early part of this process is just know that about myself, right? Okay, this feels scary, and this feels scary and it's different. But it's not always going to feel that way. And just reminding myself that every single day, it's not always going to be this way. And the other thing is that I really had less trouble with my own fear, but the people around me is what was the hardest part for me, because they saw me changing and trying on these new personalities and these new identities. And the people who didn't like that I was growing or moving to that next level, because they saw something missing in their life that I was doing, that was the harder part for me, was learning how to navigate that and what to do with those relationships. And so I'm still trying to figure that part out. I have not perfected that, but that probably was harder for me than knowing that I could do it. Self-assurance is my second highest strength. So that I typically will be like, I got this, I can do this, even if I don't.
That totally sounds like you. Well, and you're hitting on such an important point. I recently released an episode. It was a little mini episode where I just sort of pontificated on my own with no guest. But I was talking about this idea of this negativity addiction and, from a couple of standpoints. But one standpoint was from the perspective of being another person impacting, someone's life. So being an outsider impacting another person's life. And we don't realize how much not only the baggage that we carry around and the unexplored motivations, the unfulfilled goals, the untried things, the pieces of us that feel kind of crusty and full of friction that we're not working on and we haven't resolved. We don't realize that, all of that impacts our own experience and our own life. But that's the lens that we bring to our social interactions with other people. So your friends and family or whoever it was that are these people that had a hard time seeing you change and seeing you step so far outside of what your, or especially their comfort zone would be. they're bringing all of that baggage to their interaction with you. And we don't realize the implications that has for other people and other people's goal attainment and them feeling confident in the steps that they're taking. Like we put that negativity on other people.
It's so true. And I also think people can put that on us, but we also can choose whether we are going to receive it, right? Like, so when my parents and my siblings, when I started this journey, this entrepreneurial journey, and they're like, wait, you're going to leave your career as a nurse and you're going to go do this. And I was like, yep, I am. And they're like, have you thought about this? And have you thought about this? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? Or, people would say to me things like, oh, so now you're like a fitness expert. You're like a health expert. And I wanted to be like, I have a BSN.
Like, actually, I am sort of a health expert. Like a little bit. I pretty much know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And there's so I think in nursing, you usually go into a specific role, right? So you become a cardiac nurse or you become like an ER nurse. And so you kind of, you can change within those, but you do have an identity that forms in the type of nurse that you are. And so here I am trying to be like jack of all trades. I'm going to help everybody with everything. And, so there were people that were like, oh, so that's like you now. And I just borrowed other people's belief. I mean, that's literally what I tell people now when I'm working with them is like, borrow my belief that you can do this. And I know you're going to have days you think you can't, but borrow my belief because I did it and you can do it. And this girl over here did it and she did it and that girl did it and that guy did it. Like you just have to borrow belief from other people until you believe it in yourself.
That's the coolest thing I've heard in an extremely long time. That's amazing. And I'm going to need to steal that in probably 8 different ways. But minimally, that is a massive piece of value that people are going to take away from this episode. All right. So you are doing amazing work right now. And I want people to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing now around your podcast, around your business, around your, Facebook community, all of this stuff that you're doing that is still taking your love for helping people, but you're just using that knowledge and that motivation and that desire in a slightly different way. I'd love for people to hear about what you're doing now.
So, and I'm going to tell you what we're doing, but I want to also preface that it started small, right? That's what I recommend people do when they first start out and they start out on any kind of entrepreneurial journey. You kind of start with one product or you start with one area and then you grow it to the next once you kind of get comfortable, so when you hear this and you're the listener and you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do all that. I didn't do it all. This is years of work. So it'll be 3 years in August that I started my entrepreneurial journey. And so in the beginning, I started small, but I basically have, I would say 2 towers that exist for organizations that I have. And the first tower is really health, right? And so that is our Find Your Fit community. We have a free Facebook community that anyone can join. And we educate people on how to have better health in that community. And there's lots of tips and tricks and we do challenges in there. And that's just like a free service that I offer for people. And it's not really my group. It's kind of, when Find Your Fit was created, it was meant to be almost like a movement or a collective where we're all part of it and we all contribute to it. So no one's the leader and there's no person in charge of it. We all just contribute and help. And so that's like the one tower. And so people can gain their health in there. And then there is a partnership that we have where people can purchase items to help their nutrition. And so that part is monetizing that tower, right? And so then the second tower is really the Net Worth It podcast. And that tower is where people learn how to fix their financial. Because remember, I was telling you that health and wealth were like the 2 areas I struggled with. And so I was like, okay, those are the 2 things I'm going to work on. And so the Net Worth It podcast tower is where I have a Net Worth It podcast where I educate people on changing their net worth and also bring in guests who are experts and then bring in guests who have success stories, because stories are like the pulse of life to me, right? Like we learn by stories, we learn by other people's experience. And so I rotate through giving people education, telling our own personal stories so that people can feel related to, and then telling success stories. And then the Net Worth It podcast also has a Facebook group where people can learn really about wealth. And then there's a place where those two interject. Okay. So there is a place where I teach people how to do what I did with the food referrals and getting healthier and partnering with a nutrition company and then changing their net worth by increasing their income for their family. So those there's two towers, but there's like some overlap to them.
Amazing work. Seriously, if you guys, you absolutely have to check out her Facebook community. Like Gretchen mentioned, it's absolutely free, and there are amazing things that are happening inside that community. I highly suggest you check it out. The piece that I want to focus on right now, just for a second, is this notion of net worth, because when people are motivated to improve their net worth and make more money, especially, there's a point at which it's acceptable, right? Like, so it's acceptable to tell people like, wow, I'm really going to work on the debt that I'm in. People are pretty okay with that. And then you start to move into, okay, well, I'm going to work on, increasing my revenue or my salary or making more money or starting a side hustle or a side business. People tend to be okay with that. Going further than that, moving beyond, I would say, and I'm just going to put air quotes around this because put whatever number in there that you want to, but moving beyond like a normal salary or a normal amount of money that is made in sort of a normal sort of way, that starts to get this bad reputation. People start to think about words like greedy and words like, corrupt, or maybe people have bad intentions or whatever. And that is so not your outlook on it. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the mindset that you bring to why increasing your net worth is so important, why there shouldn't be a ceiling on that, because it's not like, I'm 100% sold. I'm totally there with you that moving through that ceiling doesn't all of a sudden make you a bad person, because you want to continue to grow in that respect. But I would love, given your expertise and your experience, for you to talk a little bit about, that notion of, why this is okay for people to be honest about the fact that they want to improve in this area.
I love this. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Like when I get around my best friends, we talk about this concept all the time because it just fascinates me. Well, what really it comes down to is that our whole lives in America, at least, I can't speak for other countries, we are told what our worth is. So you go to a job, you apply for the job, and they're like, here's a piece of paper that tells you what this job is worth. So now this is what you're worth. And what ends up happening, so there was actually a study, I learned about this study from a David T.S. Wood series that he did. And so I don't have the reference for the study, but there was a study where 2 job interviews were put in the newspaper, and they were the exact same verbiage for the job description, and except one of them had a $50,000 salary suggestion on there. And then the other one had a $150,000 salary suggestion on there. And more people applied to the $50,000 one than the $150,000 one. And what that shows us is that even though the job might be the exact same, like people literally will only apply for what they feel someone has told them that they're worth. So I think at the very basic level, this shame that people have or the greediness or whatever, of course it's inherited, of course it's like stories that we hear from our parents, or things that have been said to us when we're a kid. And so then we believe that to be true as an adult. But I think there's also just this, whatever job you land in, you start to believe that that's what is your worth because everyone's told you that. So you're like, okay, I guess this is what it is because everyone's told me that, So that I think is what has precipitated a lot of this problem. But I think the second thing is that people forget that money is attached to the experiences that they want. And so then when they see people with the experiences that they want and they don't have them, instead of looking in their soul and saying, okay, how do I get there? Or what do I do? Or being curious about it. Like it's human nature tendency well, I don't even know if this is human nature tendency, but what ends up happening a lot of times is people look at that and then they get jealous, right? Or they think like, well, they're not working as hard as me. And I have actually heard myself in prior situations, prior to this journey, looking at other people and being like, I could so do a better job than them. I have more education than them. These like really arrogant thoughts that I used to think, and I probably still think some of them, but I'm working on it. And, just that thought of, instead of being curious about how someone got something or arrived at some place, we want to isolate ourselves away from them and make a judgment, because then it I don't know, you probably know more about why people do that, but I'm on a mission to change that. And for people, and I think the way you change that is being honest with yourself first, right? Like where you're actually at. And most people, they don't even pay attention to it, April, because they're so sad about where they're at that they won't even pay attention. And that was me. And then when I finally started paying attention is when all these doors started opening up, because it was almost like I was releasing that energy of asking for help, and the help came to me then.
I love it. When you say pay attention, I have a feeling that this is a bit more nuanced than it may seem on the surface, because this is more than, I'm guessing, this is more than paying attention, meaning like, add up all your debt and actually be honest with yourself about what the number is. I mean, that's important, right? That's part of your net worth calculation. But from the way that you describe that, there's more nuance to it around owning the thoughts that you have and the feelings that might be underneath them and where they might be coming from and how they might be impacting you. Is that the case?
Yes. And the first book I ever read on this topic, I mean, there's a million amazing books out there, like You Are a Badass at Making Money and, lots of other things, Freakonomics. My favorite book, though, that listeners can listen to is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker.
I love that book. I love that book so much. Oh my God.
Yes. I give that book to everyone. And I'm like, I buy it in like 10 or 20 copies at a time, because it really was the first time when I read that book, it was the first time I realized I wasn't accountable to my thoughts about money. And I was like, holy crap, I am not accountable at all. And I literally changed how I spoke about money, because as you know the brain so much more than I do. It all starts with your belief. Like if your belief is a certain way, that's going to affect your thoughts, and then your thoughts are going to affect your habits, and your habits are going to affect your outcomes. And so you have to go all the way back to your beliefs. Like just looking at your budget isn't going to do anything, because you're starting with like the last step, right? Where you need to start with the first step, which is change the way that you believe about money and how it's coming to you. And so when I work with people, that's the first thing I do with them is like, let's talk about your money story. Let's talk about what you believe about money, because that's going to affect every other thing from here on out.
That is an amazing practical piece of advice right there, that people can start to really think about the stories that they're telling themselves about money. And there is a huge connection to the way that we were brought up and the way that we grew up, and we carry that with us and we don't even realize. I mean, small little anecdote, I grew up in a fairly poor family. We didn't have a lot of money at all growing up, and through medical situations and whatever, you talk about health. I mean, holy cow, through medical situations and things, like there were a lot of bills and a lot of debt that was really soaking up a lot of that. And so when I got into adulthood, I was very used to money being something that was hard to get, extremely hard to get, money being something that was very scarce, that was a source of anxiety, that was something that you always had to be afraid of, that you had to be afraid to spend or even invest parts of it because it would be lost and taken away from you. And I didn't realize how pervasive those thoughts were and how much of my behavior they were dictating until I reached adulthood, was well into my career. I had gotten married at that point and we were nicely financially stable. Like I had worked my way up the corporate ladder by that point. I married my husband who has a good salary. Like together we were really nicely stable, and I was still, and this is to your point, it's more than just calculating the bottom line, because I do data science as a day job. I know what that number is. Like I can see what our annual income is. It wasn't enough. I was anxious all the time, all the time because I was carrying these stories around with me. It was crazy.
Yes, it's so true. And if you think about like, okay, you have a person who wants to start a business, right? And they're like, okay, I found this business, I'm going to do it. So if their money story is that money never comes to them, they're always broke, nothing ever good happens to me, they're not going to take the opportunity to start having conversations around them with people who maybe could help them to change their relationships, which could become future clients, which they could maybe meet someone. All of the time, I meet people who are like, oh, well, I'm not really interested in what you're doing, but I have this friend who totally would do it. But if I had this crappy mindset that nothing was ever going to come to me, I wouldn't even reach out to that person to talk to them because I'd be like, oh, what's the point? What's going to happen? But when you have a mindset of, T. Harv Eker in one of his affirmations is like, he talks about how money finds me wherever I go, or opportunities find me wherever I go. And so when I wake up in the morning and I say that to myself, like, today I'm going to attract people into my life who are ready for a change, who want to change their life. And then all of a sudden I see people around me everywhere. So it influenced my behavior and I talked to them. And then all of a sudden I met a girl at a park yesterday. We weren't even planning on going to this park, and my daughter. So one of my very favorite values and just most important value is time. And you and I share that. And that's why we are like such good soul sisters. But
yeah, girl,
I love having my time be my own. Right. And so at 2:00, I want to go to the park with my daughter. If I want to go to the park with my daughter, I don't want to be waiting for shift change. Right. And so I take my daughter to the park because I can. And there's a girl doing box jumps. And I'm like, wow, you're super fit. If I had a bad mindset, I wouldn't even talk to her. But I have a great mindset about it. And I'm like, I want to meet people who are healthy because that's passion for me. So we start talking and she's like, oh my gosh, you're exactly what I've been looking for. Like, we weren't even planning on going to that park. Right. And my mindset, like, brought me habits of this lifestyle where I'm able to go to parks in the middle of the day and meet people who are active and healthy. And so they end up being part of my business and part of my organization and part of my life. And then they know people. And it's just like this, it's almost like a snowball that reaches the top of a hill and goes down the other side. And it just becomes giant because it's just growing like wildfire, with relationships and abundance. But when your mindset is like, no one likes me, I'll never make money, this sucks, whatever it is, you're not going to take those actions to even talk to people. So it totally starts there.
I totally agree. Something else that he says in that book, and this is kind of turning into a T. Harv Eker love fest, but he's so awesome. Like, you guys, I'll link to the book on Gretchen's show notes page. It's so awesome. But for real, one of the things he talks about in the book is changing your identity around the number that, like, basically filling in the blank of, I'm the type of person who makes X dollars per year. Like, what's your number? And then what if you added 30% on top of that? It starts to, and then you crafted, your identity does not have to be wrapped up in what you currently make. Your identity can be whatever it is you decide it is. So maybe I decide I don't make $1 million a year right now, but my identity is maybe I'm the type of person who makes $1 million a year. That sets this intention in your brain, and it's exactly what you're saying. And what I talk about ad nauseum on this podcast, it turns into a goal-seeking thing for your brain. And your brain's like, okay, well, my identity is that I make $1 million a year. I'm only making blah, blah, 100,000 or whatever it is a year. Where's the rest of my money? I got to go find it. And it starts goal seeking and looking for opportunities and trying to find this money that it believes it belongs to it. It's just crazy how that happens. It's so cool.
I love that. And that's why I love you, because I learned so much from you about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. So it's so good.
So I want to hear a little bit I want to kind of move into some practical things. So let's say somebody came to you and they were like, hi, I need help in this area. What are your 3 big practical tips for people?
So in our Facebook community, we have a tool in there that people can have for free. And it's a tool that really just gets them to thinking about where their current situation is at, because you have to just come to your current situation without shame and without judgment, right? So it is what it is. Like when Mike and I sat down and we figured out what our net worth was and found out the number was negative and we were in our 30s, we were like, okay, it is what it is. Like we can't we can't go backwards. So we're going to start here, and we're not going to have shame about it. And we're just going to come to Jesus, if you will, right? About where we're at, and come to an agreement that we're not going to live like this anymore. So that's like the first thing is that you have to do. And the second thing is to find help. I mean, honestly, if you haven't done it up till now on your own, there's a reason why you haven't done it, because you're relying on your own resources and yourself. Like, we are a social creature. We are a social community. In all of the things I do, I connect people into communities, and I put people into different groups of likeness, like a bunch of physicians get to be in a certain group together, not like Facebook group. I'm just talking like in community. Right. And so the second thing is just asking for help and finding that help. And the third thing is changing who you surround yourself with. Okay. So, you might think number 2 and 3 are the same, but they're not. So number 2 is finding the help that you need. But number 3 is all about that mindset piece, right? So if you are in a situation where all of your friends are broke, all of your friends complain about their life, all of your friends just, want, like that's all that you're around all the time. Guess what? That's how you're going to be. Like you have to realize that if you want to change that, like you have to go find people who are where you want to be and surround yourself with them, learn from them, watch how they act, watch how they respond to things, watch what they do, hang out with them wherever they're hanging out. Like that is what I did, is I did those 3 things, and the mesh of those 3 things, you're going to get an amazing life out of that.
Those are 3 incredible tips. And on that third one, we have another incredible friend. And this is literally it. This is like, I met Gretchen and she became part of that tribe with me. And Gretchen introduced me to an amazing woman named Natalie, who is now hosting a podcast called the Mentee Podcast. Check that one out as well. She is another woman that has been brought into that tribe, and she focuses so much on the people that you surround yourself with and the impact they have on your mindset, your goals, your belief in what you're capable of doing, and how you might, the path you might take to get there to achieve those goals. So, I mean, find Gretchen online and find Natalie on the Mentee Podcast, because both doing incredible work. Okay. So wealth, we just took care of. Health, 3 tips.
Yes. Okay. I have to go back to wealth and say one thing, just so the listeners just know how real of a person I am. So when I was working with your husband one night at the ER, and he said something to the effect of like, you and my wife remind me of each other, or you remind me of my wife, and I was like, oh, cool. Who's your wife? And he like told me your name, and I looked you up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this chick is like doing it. Like she's like freaking doing it. And so when I knew that I wanted to have you be one of the people that I started hanging out with, because I was like, I need to learn from her. Like I need to be her friend. And I knew that we'd be good friends just from other things that he had told me. But I sent you a message on Facebook, Natalie a message on Facebook, and another entrepreneur on Facebook. And I'm like, listen, I know we don't know each other, but can we just like go have coffee and hang out and I don't know, meet each other? And look at, now I'm on your podcast. Like this is what people need to see, is that 3 years ago, I was just somebody looking at a website going, I wish I could do that. How do I do that? And when I was starting this podcast, you were ahead of me as far as launching yours. And I went to you and I said, hey, like, how do you actually record an episode? I mean, like I feel like I can talk, but I mean, like, what do you actually use? And and vice versa.
There's a little bit behind the scenes there. Yeah. There's like a few bullet points you have to know. It's crazy, actually.
And so I just want to encourage you listening. Like if you are sitting at your desk at your job, or you listen to this on the way to work, or you're listening to it on the way home, or while you're doing the dishes, and you're just thinking, yeah, but I can't. Yeah, but just forget all of that. Like if you are just willing to raise your hand and say, I will do it even if I'm scared. There are people like April and Natalie and I who are like, yeah, girl, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And people like myself and you and Natalie who will say, great, what's your goal? Let me give you everything I have. Like I will literally hand over my list of of technology that I use, of, software that I use, of people who I connect with. You can have everything. You can have every piece of learning that I've made from every public and out there mistake that is still on previous episodes of this podcast, by the way. And that's the whole point behind, and Gretchen's episode will be on this playlist that's on my website, of the Pave the Way playlist of podcast episodes. These are all people who said, oh my God, I went through the hard just slog to get here. I made all the mistakes. I tripped over all the obstacles. I fell on my face a million times. And here's the easy button. And here's all the stuff that I learned. I'm going to give it to you. And that's literally like anybody listening to this, that is exactly how I approach all of this work that I do. That's exactly how Gretchen approaches her work. I have never met a person who is more, when she says she is a maximizer, by the way, no one can automate like this woman. No one can streamline and make something efficient and organized and beautiful and wrapped up like this woman can. I mean, and she will literally give you anything. And Natalie is the same way. Like, if I have figured it out, you can have it. And so that's such a great tip, because finding those groups of people who are not going to be guarded, they're not going to guard the knowledge that they have. They're not going to try to initiate you like, damn, I went through hell to get here and you're going to too. No, they're going to pave the road and make it smoother and more friction free for you. Those are the people you need to get in your circle, because they are going to launch you further than you can do on your own, because no one can be it all on their own.
So true. It's so true. Yes. I love it. All of it. Okay. Health tips. You want me to go into my health tips?
Because I'll just thump on that all day if we don't move on. So let's go into health tips, because those are important too. And I'm just going to keep talking. So I'll be quiet now.
Yes. Okay. So if you, so one of the things I love is that the concept of getting healthy can look different, right? For each person. Like, our bodies are all unique, and what works for one person is maybe going to be a little bit different for another person. But there are some basic things that you need to do to stay healthy and to be at your optimal performance. And one of them is, the first tip is to have protein for breakfast. Like, there's so many people who talk about this, and there are so many people, even, oh my gosh, you're going to have to help me, April, with the neurosculpting. What is her name?
Lisa Wimberger.
Yes. Okay. I mean, she even talks about this. Brendan Burchard talks about this. Tony Robbins talks about this. Like, there are so many high level successful entrepreneurs who scream to the rooftops about having protein in the morning. And if you want to learn more about why that is, Lisa does a great job in her audiobook just talking about what happens in the body when you only have carbohydrates, and then you're trying to like function on that midday, and what that does to your brain and all of it. So it's super fascinating. But if you don't want to dive that deep, you can just listen to me and tell you need to have protein in the morning. And so for a lot of people, that can be a barrier. And so that's one of the barriers that I work with people on is how to overcome that. Like, what, do I have to eat chicken for breakfast? That kind of thing. So we work with people on that. And the second tip would be, your rest and your stress. Like, people so overlook this one. They think like, I'm going to crush it in the gym. I'm going to eat perfectly and meal prep. And then their life is full of stress. And let me tell you a story. So one of the cardiologists that I used to work with at a level 1 trauma center, which was my last nursing job, I went up and asked him one day, and I was like, listen, you've been a cardiologist for like 30 years. What, in your opinion, is the worst thing that you can do for your heart? And he told me 2 things. Not getting enough sleep and having too much stress. And his experience as a cardiologist for 30 years, now this is just one person's opinion, is that he felt like he had seen more patients who damaged by that than people smoking. He's like, everyone obsesses about smoking, but when I see these people who are they're like seriously asking so much of their heart in their daily lives, like they are doing just as much damage to their cardiovascular system. And I was like, oh, yes, girl, it was just like, oh my gosh. And I haven't done a ton of research to back up what he said, but it was just remarkable to me about how much people overlook that stress. And that's where I was. And I was like, yeah, but I still have to go to my job. Yeah, but I still have to raise my kids, and I still have to do all these obligations. Like, there are things you can do to like mind hack, and you give tons of.
Dude. Yes.
You give so many tips in this area where you can like hack your mind in short increments of time so that you can work on it. So that'd be number 2. And the third thing would be to make sure you're drinking enough water. Like this sounds so rudimentary, but like people literally walk around dehydrated. And it's one of the easiest things that you can do is get a 50-ounce water bottle and fill it up twice in the day. If that's the right amount of water for you, that's, approximately what I drink and recommend people to drink, but you need to like go with whatever is your own health need. But having your water bottle be, this is the stupidest thing, but it's not stupid. It's just the simplest thing is most people don't drink enough water because they're literally not setting themselves up for success. Mm-hmm. They'll like leave the house with this little like 16-ounce water, and then they're out shopping all day and all of a sudden it's gone in an hour. And so then they're like, oh, I'm thirsty. I think I'll go get a coffee or I'll get some sugary drink. Like you need to set yourself up for success with having a water bottle that is big enough to last you for however long you're going to be out. So, I mean, honestly, like if people could do those 3 things, like they would see such improvements in their life.
Well, and I love how realistic you are about everything. Like I have to put a huge plug in for the protein for breakfast thing. This was something I started, probably 7 years ago. I started noticing, and at the time, the way that I did this, like the tiny little shift I made is that I forced myself, no matter what else I was eating for breakfast, I had to get a hard-boiled egg in first. That was it. That was my initial, movement in this area. That has since grown, and now it's both. I mean, we were just joking about this via text message earlier. Now my morning sort of protein breakfast hack involves a big bang of protein and, some vitamins and minerals that are just amazing. And I've said this to you before, I've said this to my husband 1,000 times before, like that combination first thing in the morning at 2 p.m. in the afternoon when other people are ready to take a nap and they're slogging through their day, I'm like, whose car do you want me to flip over? Like I could literally flip a car over if I do that. And it is and I'm like all animated and waving my hands around and just, truth be told, it's 1:30 p.m. when we are recording this part of the podcast. Had protein earlier today. I feel like I have so much energy. It is game changing. It's crazy. Yeah. It's such a good tip.
So true. It's so true. I love that.
Okay. So we've talked about like flipping cars over and quitting jobs and making money and like all this crazy stuff, our crazy husbands. If you want to know a really funny story, it's funny and it's authentic and it is sad, but so hilarious anyway, about Gretchen and her husband. Please go check her podcast out. There is an episode, and I don't know the number right offhand. A better host would have known that. But she tells this story, this oatmeal story about her and her husband calculating their net worth and figuring out where they were at when they were at their low point. It is hysterical, but it also highlights the amazing journey that Gretchen and her family have taken and why she is absolutely this inspiring person that I wanted you all to meet.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. It's episode 5, the oatmeal and golf clubs. And I've gotten the most feedback on that episode because I lay it all out there. I mean, I literally threw something at my husband, and most people aren't willing to admit that they like committed domestic violence. But it's like, sometimes you just got to lay all your cards on the table, and your clients and your customers are going to trust you so much when you do that. So if you're on an entrepreneurial journey, don't ever feel like you have to lie or make up anything. Just be so real and authentic, and people will just want to follow you.
Heck to the yeah. Okay. So when people want to find you, because I know they're going to want to, because you should, because she's awesome. Tell people where they can find you, because there's a few places that I know people should check out.
Yes. So my website is gretchenheinen.com, and that will be in the show notes, I'm sure. And that's really the best place to connect with me because it has links to everything else. You can even like schedule yourself directly into my calendar from my website. One of my friends was like, are you really going to do that? You're going to like just let people schedule themselves onto your calendar? I'm like, heck yeah, because the right ones will come. So it's the best place to go and check out what I do.
I love it. I love it. And from there, I highly suggest you guys look for her podcast called Net Worth It. She has a few handfuls of episodes out right now. They are all phenomenal. And like I said, check out the Oatmeal and Golf Club story. It's awesome. And then check out her Find Your Fit community on Facebook. It is such valuable information. And like Gretchen said, it's absolutely free. Last question that I have for you is a question that I ask every single person on the podcast, and I'm not letting you get away without asking it as well, even though you're my friend. We're compiling a Spotify Power playlist of amazingly motivational songs that people can turn to when they need a little bit of a pump me up. So I have to ask you for your contribution to the playlist.
Oh, yes. Okay. I love this. This is one of my favorite things about your show. So the song that I would recommend people listen to and that I frequently get myself pumped up to is For the Love of Money by the OJs. It's kind of a old school.
Do.
Yeah, girl. It's a little old school, but it just is like such a good beat. And I'm sure he probably has other ideas about how to make money in that song, but we're gonna make money the way we want to, not his ways.
I can't wait. It's not on the playlist, and I'm really excited to add it. That is so awesome. Gretchen, as always, are a total breath of fresh air. It has been amazing to have you on. I've wanted to do this for a number of months now, and the more you're putting out there and the more amazing just resources and value that you're putting into the world, I just had to do it. And I'm so thrilled that people got to meet you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, April. This has been so fun.
All right, friends, I really hope you loved that episode with Gretchen Heinen. I had way too much fun chatting with her on her interview because she is just a fun, incredible person. And she just has so much just insight and so much value to give. And she just has the biggest heart that you've ever encountered in the world. So I really hope you guys enjoyed meeting her. I want to call out a few things. Number one, you know that I am a giant proponent of intentional life design, and Gretchen is a beautiful example of somebody who practices that on a daily basis. She had a successful career, a stable, successful career as a nurse. And she was continuously asking herself, is this aligned with what I want to be doing? Is this aligned with my values? Is this career allowing me to live the life that I want to live? And at some point in time, that answer flipped to no. And that's a really difficult thing to come to terms with. And it's hard to be honest with yourself when you've put the amount of time into something that Gretchen had put into. This is not something that she just decided to do on a whim. This required a ton of school and a ton of planning. And she had a really long career before she walked away from it. And that courage to say, no, this is not actually what I want for my life and what I want my days to look like. That's something that I really admire in her, is that she had the courage to say no. And the reason why she had that and the place that comes from is that on a daily basis, she is practicing this idea that I talk about all the time of being really intentional and reflecting back on yourself. And, you can lie to everybody else. It doesn't matter. It's nobody else's business how you spend your time or what decisions you make or how you choose to set your life up. But minimally, don't lie to yourself. Be honest with yourself. If that answer is no for you, admitting that to yourself and starting to let your mind wander into what things might be possible for you, what life could look like, that's a really powerful step to take. And that was Gretchen's first step, and she does that on a daily basis. That's how she's created the amazing life she lives today. So highly suggest you do the same. Second, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that, as you start to do something different and as you start to move away from doing sort of the typical thing that your friends and family, both, things that they do, but then also things that they're used to seeing you do, you'll notice that a lot of the time, judgments and opinions and backlash tend to increase just as you're making this big leap that you're absolutely terrified to make. And that's the last time that you actually want to experience backlash from people, is when you're really feeling like you don't have a ton of confidence about the steps you're taking. But Gretchen talked about it and she said it beautifully. That has so much more to do with where that person's at and how they are feeling about their own situation than it has to do with you and your ability and how successful you will ultimately be. So I titled Gretchen's episode Borrow My Belief because that is exactly it. Look to people who have done what you want to be doing. Look to them those folks who are, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road from you, and borrow their belief that it is possible and start taking some steps today. Don't listen so much to those people around you who are trying to keep you on that traditional path that they just might be too afraid to wander off. Go wander off and see what you can find. Now, third, I loved the conversation we had around money mindset. This is it's not something that I focus on a ton on the podcast, and it's not a huge area of focus for me on my website or in social media, but it was a huge transformative thing for me in my own life. So I talked about my own backstory of how, I grew up not having a ton of money, but even once I got into a financial situation where I was very, very comfortable and very stable, I was still extremely anxious all the time. I was still so worried that the rug would be pulled out from underneath me and that I would end up completely broke. And that mindset is not the way to increase your own net worth and increase the value that you're bringing to the world. You can't operate from a place of scarcity and think that you're going to be able to do big things. So that money mindset transformation that I went through, largely it was spurred by the book that we talked about, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I can't recommend that book highly enough. You're going to go into it, you're going to roll your eyes and be skeptical. Do the things the book says. Roll your eyes while you're doing it. I don't care. It was transformative to me. And if you do decide to do this, if you take that plunge, I totally want to hear from you. I want to hear the transformation that I guarantee you're going to have. It is just an incredible book. And last, I want to call out Gretchen's amazing practical tips in both the areas of health and in wealth. They seem like they're really straightforward, but if you're not doing them, there's a reason why you're not feeling as well as you could in those two areas. So take her seriously. Try it out for sure. And honestly, another plug for the protein for breakfast. Oh my God, get a big bang of protein at the beginning of your day. If you want my crazy recipe for the amazing concoction I drink in the morning that makes me feel like I could flip cars over in the afternoon, I'm not kidding. Definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to share it. It is a little bit of a, involved thing, so I'm not going to go over it now, but for sure, reach out. Happy to share it. What's mine is yours. Let's flip some cars over because afternoon is a lot more fun when you have a ton of energy. So I really, really, really hope you guys adored meeting Gretchen, and I hope you had as much fun listening to her story as I did recording it. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.